Today, we delve into the essence of self-discovery with our final panel, Self-Discovery, The Power Within, moderated by Ms. Nargish Kambata, Principal and CEO of GEMS Modern Academy and Vice President of GEMS Education. With 35 years of experience in the educational field and a passionate educator, her simple educational philosophy is all children deserve to be given ample opportunity to discover their worth, their interests, and their passion in a secure and happy environment for them to grow into confident adults with a moral compass to guide them to their goals. I welcome Ms. Nargish Kambata to introduce the final panel.
Thank you. No, 403 entry is that way.
Thank you very much, Shruti and Anusya. And I think these young ladies have been really hard at work. Can we hear a round of applause for them? I must confess that we're going on a journey of self-discovery, and I was a tad anxious 5 minutes ago. You can't hear? Is that better? Is that better? No? Okay, we'll just try a hand mic. Is that better? Yes? No, all right. Hello, can you hear now? Is that better? Yes, thank you very much. So I think I was a tad anxious, and the reason for that is the third panel member is stuck in traffic and he's on his way. But doesn't matter, we'll just go ahead, we'll introduce everybody, and then have you, when he comes in, we can give him a huge round of applause for having braved it through the traffic. But ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I think when we were discussing the topic of the panel, we realized that all of us were thoughtful practitioners, as is everybody else in this room. I think you are facilitators of transformation, and I don't say this lightly, because you know what a journey you've been on. And you weren't always this confident, were you? You can remember times in your youth when you were uncomfortable with who you are. And it took you some time to realize your own self-worth. And what did that journey look like? And how did you arrive at this exalted position? Just to read the mood in the room, or to know who's in the room, may I know how many of us are principals in this room or heads of school? Thank you. How many of us are school owners? All right. How many of us are, from a different background, but educators at heart? There you go. Just so we know who we are addressing in the room, General Kulkarni put his hand up 4 times to my 3 questions. But I do want to say something to you gentlemen sitting at the back. They say the people sitting in the front, they say they go on to be heads of schools, educators, and the captains of industry. And then the guys who sit at the back, they employ the guys in front. So gentlemen, I'd like to go ahead and introduce the panel. There's lots we're going to discuss, and I'm sure what we're hoping is that there will be plenty of takeaways from you, because what is a panel discussion if you don't have some takeaways? So if we don't give you enough takeaways, please hold us accountable. And we will pause and listen to you as well, because I'm sure some of the stories that can be shared from the floor are going to be amazing and have an equal number of takeaways. So I'm really privileged actually with the panel here, and I'm going to introduce Dr. Anju first. I believe she has many people who already know her in this room, and she doesn't need much introduction, but all the same. Well, she's quite a visionary, and if you know her backstory, which I'm sure she will share with you at some point, you'll see why she is so well known. Dr. Anju is a visionary. She is the founder of the Mahatma Gandhi International School. She's got a doctorate in education from King's College in London. She's also pioneered something called GRL, which is Generated Resources Learning. And I believe that's an innovative pedagogy that really emphasizes sensory engagement and also experiential methods. That's quite unique. And I think Her influence spans not only across India but even Europe and North America. So she's celebrated actually, and she's contributed to the National Education Policy 2020 as well. She's been honored with awards, and when I told her pick your most favorite one, she said, and I'm going to find this difficult to pronounce, but I shall try. My French is not as good as my German. So it's Palmes Académiques, which I believe was instituted by Napoleon in France, and it's the highest honor for civilians in France. So she's also got the She Rise Award, and she said, if you don't mention that, it's all right. She's also a French foreign trade advisor, and that's really the global reach and impact that she has. But she is dedicated to a holistic education, and I think I love this part. When I got her CV, it says, the integration of intuition and cultural context in learning, which truly makes it transformative. So, Dr. Anju, my pleasure to welcome you on stage. And then we have the lovely Jane Larson, whom some of you have been meeting. And before I even introduce Jane, I want to tell you how resilient she is. Jane didn't get her luggage until last evening. It got lost in transit, and she had to visit schools. She had to, be present. She went to light the lamp yesterday, as you're aware, and she said, "I'll just wash this dress and wear it again. It's all right." That's who she is. The quality of leadership stood out for us. Absolutely stood out. And Jane has led the Council of International Schools as executive director since her appointment in 2010, and I think she's had a very strategic focus on developing collaborative partnerships. And not just any kind of partnerships, but partnerships to enable educational exchange. So all those of you looking for that kind of engagement, please, Jane's your go-to person. And also the development of socially responsible leadership. I think that's going to appeal to every leader in this room. Socially responsible leadership. And how's that? Through international education. Of course, the CIS global membership community of schools and universities currently stands at 1,558. That's pretty impressive, across 120 countries. And each is committed to very high standards in international education. Ask me, we are a CIS accredited school. We got accredited in 2021. And I have to say, the standards are extremely high. And we enjoyed that journey. As Jane says, it's really an opportunity for community building within your own school. And I never understood the impact of that statement until we went through the CIS accreditation. It was quite a brilliant journey. Jane lends her voice to key topics shaping the future of international education. And she told me you can stop there. But I think what resonated with me is that she is currently serving as the chair of the International Task Force on Child Protection. Absolutely brilliant. And there are plenty of resources. She was talking to me on the way here, and she says the kind of resources, and they're open resources. So for those of us interested in knowing more about available resources, I'm sure Jane will enlighten us. She's also the vice chair of the board of directors of the International Commission for Advancing Independent Schools Accreditation. So Jane, welcome. And in absentia, I'm going to introduce you to Laksharaj. He's just messaged me, and I saw the message pop up as I was reading this. He's still stuck in traffic. He's been at it for 1 hour. We all know what Delhi traffic looks like. But he's Maharaj Kumar Sahib, Dr. Laksharaj Singh Ji of Mewar of Udaipur. I think many of us know him. Can I just have a show of hands? How many of you know him? Yeah, you already know him. And he's quite a public figure. He's a distinguished figure with multifaceted contributions. He inspires. He's a philanthropist, an educationist, a sports patron. He has had significant impact in diverse fields, and I believe from conserving heritage and advancing education to promoting sport and enhancing hospitality. He's also a TEDx speaker. He's an 8-time Guinness World Record holder. I don't know anybody else who's an 8-time Guinness World Record holder. His dedication to public service, I think, is very, very evident through his initiatives. During the pandemic, he's donated ambulances. He's done so much work with the war widows. He's contributed to, the underprivileged communities, and I think it just exemplifies his commitment for social betterment and upliftment. He's also a trustee on various foundations. He's also got a very dynamic approach, tireless efforts, reflect a deep commitment to building resilient communities and fostering global citizenship. Well, there's plenty more, but I'm going to stop there. If I turn his CV into ChatGPT, his CV is actually 8 to 10 pages long. And even ChatGPT found it difficult to give me a one pager. So you can imagine. And with that, he's your student, Mr. Sri Ramji. Could you stand up and take a bow on his behalf? Thank you. So whenever he arrives, I think we're just going to pause and give him the applause he deserves. What I am going to do now is request Rupa and Jane to introduce themselves. Do you have a mic there? To introduce themselves and beyond their CVs, and really talk us through their own journeys. I believe self-discovery is a never-ending process, never-ending. And if anyone says they've arrived, they know who they are, then I think it's a story untold and undiscovered. So, Rupa, over to you. I beg your pardon. You see, Rupa in her pink attire is just sab pe chha gayi hai.
The Barbie color always beats everything else. The pink is the flavor of the season. Okay, so it's a hard thing to talk about, right? When you talk about self-discovery. And it's a perennial human quest over the ages, I think even over lifetimes. There are two things that you have mentioned in your topic: self-discovery, the power within. So I want to address two aspects. First of all, what is the nature of the self? It's a very ambiguous kind of a term. You say, oh, I know myself. Which self? Is it the ego self? Is it that self which is external? Which self are you? Who are you really? Because it comes down to that. And what has constituted you? Are you that friend? Are you that husband or that wife or that daughter? Are you that person that society wants you to be? And you keep on confirming because you need to be that. You play all these roles, but at the true essence of it, how many compromises have you made? When you go to school already, because we're all educators, I keep hearing this term, oh, we have to mold children in this way. And I kind of get a little wary of that because I feel I don't want to mold anybody at all. They've come with a blueprint. Everybody has come with their own DNA, a spiritual DNA, I would say. And our role is just to allow that which is within to blossom, to come out. So the first thing is the nature of the self. And when are we really going to touch that self, that core self? It happens actually when there's a shock in life. Till then, everything is going well. We are playing a role, and we're playing different roles for different people. But when something happens, like a material loss or a shock or betrayal or something, and the rug is pulled from under your feet, then suddenly you begin to hang on to the only thing that you have, which is yourself. And then you need to find that time to touch and go within. And that is where the real power lies. And if you look at all the scientific discoveries which have been made through humanity, look at Archimedes relaxing in his bathtub, look at Newton under the tree. Think about Edison, who used to sit in a state between dream and wakefulness, and that's how he discovered all his 99 odd patents. Or if you think of Ramanujan, the great Indian mathematician, whose formulas all came to him during his dreams. So many of us are getting knowledge or something from another dimension in space. Carl Jung might call it the archetypes or the unconscious, the collective unconscious. In quantum physics, we're calling it the field, the quantum field. So there are different words. They would, in spiritual woo-woo stuff, you might say it's the divine, the cosmic world. But there is something out there, there is knowledge, something that I can access. But how can I access it? Only when I go within. That's the first thing. And it happened to me on two fronts, because years ago when we started our school, I wrote know thyself as a primary purpose of education. I felt it wasn't about the grades or about the marks or whatever. Schools have to be spaces where you can allow young people to get in touch with themselves. And if I can answer these two questions, who am I and why am I here, then half of the battle is won. And when I did that, I didn't know what I was really thinking about, because there are two journeys. One is the outer journey. You know, we are here on earth, we incarnate and we are on a journey. But the greatest journey is actually within. And funnily enough, my maiden surname happens to be Musafir, which is actually a traveler. So we are all travelers actually. Now, in that course, what happened to me and my husband was we lost our daughter in 2014, Tara. And that was the biggest shock, as you can well imagine, which pulled the rug. And that's the time when all your belief systems turn, you know, nothing matters anymore. All the conditionings are gone, all the trappings of whatever ego, power, ambition, nothing remains. And then you come down to what's the purpose of my life? And I realized so deeply then, my purpose was education. I was fulfilling my life's purpose. So there was a voice within, and I began to get Tara's messages that she had intuitively written, and I would go and find those messages, walking around, sometimes a little note, and that would become a guiding path. Now, how did this 9-year-old girl, who in fact one of her greatest poems was, Who am I? Am I a body? Am I a soul? Though now I lie on this bed, one day I will be up and running and all of my dreams will come true, but I still have to find out who am I. So that 9-year-old child writing Who am I shows that whether they are children or whether we are teenagers or adults, we still have that question to answer, who am I truly? Now, coming back to the idea of self-discovery, that was just my personal journey, and that intuition awoke because Tara would always tell us, I don't want to grow older because I will have to leave you one day. And I don't want to be a teenager. And then she didn't become a teenager because she passed on at the age of 12 and a half. And I began to wonder, what does this mean? How did she know? Did she know really? What is life and what is afterlife? So that's how I began to develop, at least undergo trainings to develop the intuition further. And I realized that intuition is something everybody has. For example, firefighters. Now, firefighters, these are studies which have been done. These are emergency decisions that you have to take when you are in such stressful situations. So, for example, in 2001 October, in Leicester, in UK, there was a fire, and there's this fireman called Andy Kirk. He goes inside with his entire team. The whole building is on fire. And suddenly he tells the whole team, evacuate now. And everybody rushes out. And he doesn't know why he says that. And seconds later, the entire building collapses. So he saved his entire team. Now, there are two kinds of intuition. One is a rapid processing of your rational brain. The other is unknown. And this firefighter says that there was no prior knowledge for this kind of fire which he could have processed, which his brain could have processed. So this was coming from some unknown thing, like Ramanujan's mathematical theorems, which nobody understood that time, which are still being understood today. So intuition is that space inside us that where we can access. That is the power. That's a power of knowledge. It's a kind of a compass. It's a moral compass. It is an ethical compass. It's a spiritual compass. It's a life compass. It's a life path. And what has happened is we've used a lot of our left brain, analytical thinking, rational thinking, but the right brain, if I have to talk about the two sides of the brain, the intuitive part, we haven't really given it much of significance in education. In other things, yes, in religion or other spheres. But I'm saying in education, we need to do that. Now, in leadership, to conclude now my introductory thing, I would say that, you know, as an institution leader or a teacher or whatever role you're playing, I would be always in a state of receptivity. To be intuitive means to be open and to be receptive. So when somebody comes to you with something, with a problem, a child comes, this kid has been missing school for a long time. And prima facie, it seems he's just playing truant. But what's his backstory? Is he disturbed? Are his parents fighting behind? Or this teacher who's perpetually coming late to school is sorry to say, but is a mother-in-law harassing her a lot in the mornings? And that's a very common story sometimes. Is she having a problem with her husband? She has no house help. She's having some health issues. You don't know. So always to be in a state of receptivity and to take decisions not only from the rational side, but to make choices from the intuitive spot. And there is some message that comes, your gut feeling. And when you are making decisions for yourself, whether it's your life partner, whether it's a career change, what's your body telling you? How do you feel inside? We've stopped listening to our bodies, actually. That is why we're falling sick, because we don't listen to the signals. But your body tells you. And when I also hear of a lot of, women have it a lot. I'm sure men do too. I'm sounding very biased. But you see, we have antenna. And sometimes you're going to go into a room and you don't like the vibes of somebody, the way this person just touches you, right? And you feel that touch isn't good. You know it. But we're not teaching our young people to figure out, listen to yourself. Trust yourself. Because listening to yourself ultimately is about trusting yourself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anju. There's just so much we've taken away from that. And before we go on to Jane, I just want to comment on a few things. Thank you for sharing your personal story. I'm sure there's not a single person in this room who was not moved. And you talked about intuition. I think Pearson has spent 25 years studying intuition. And they've come up with a loose definition. They say even after 25 years, we don't have a concrete definition. And they say it is a learned positive use of unconscious information for better actions. That's how they've defined intuition. And there's three elements to it. One, it's learned, which not many people link it to. Everybody thinks intuition is just a gut feel, but no, it's actually learned. It's usually positive. It's not misintuition, which is completely different, which is paranoia. But it actually stems from unconscious information that you've been storing at some point to use for positive actions later. And that Pearson has defined after that 25 years of study as intuition. But thank you so much for sharing. And I'm also wondering why it's always the poor mother-in-law, never the father-in-law who gets called out. But Jane, over to you. Thank you, Anju.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy that we have this time together as leaders to reflect on our lives and our roles as leaders. And we've all thought quite a bit and discussed how we wanted to frame this conversation this morning. And after quite a bit of deliberation, I'd like to focus on our vulnerability as leaders, because these are conversations that are coming up more and more as we move forward in a time of great change and divisiveness. And frequently we see how sometimes we don't use our vulnerability as a tool when we're a leader. Because as many leaders will say, well, I'm being paid to make decisions. My board expects me to be strong. I don't want to be vulnerable, I'll be fired. But what are the consequences of not sharing our vulnerability? Nargesh mentioned that at CIS, we've been focused on the concept of socially responsible leadership. And what is it? Well, I guess the biggest thing I would say to you is that as we've had discussions about this vision of developing socially responsible leaders in the broadest sense, there's an urge to define it. And one of the things we've done is to resist that temptation because it's so contextual. What socially responsible leadership looks like for you and you and you individually are very different things because we serve different communities. And so that truth has to emerge in conversation with a community. But I would put forward, I'm thinking quite a bit about how we allow ourselves as leaders to appear vulnerable in front of our colleagues and our teams, and what a difference that can make. Now, there are two quotes that I want to share with you that have impacted me personally a great deal over the last 4 years. Because let's face it, we've all been through a number of significant changes. And so we've read a lot, we've searched a lot for inspiration about the way forward. One person who's quite a hero to me is someone I've never met, but he is Surgeon General of the United States. His name is Vivek Murthy. And one of the quotes that I read, actually, it was back in 21, he was reflecting, and this was what he said. He said, "The pandemic has given us an amazing opportunity to re-examine how we want to live our lives." And you know what? How many people do you know who have done just that? And it's an incredible opportunity and challenge to think about how we want to live our lives and what we're actually going to do about that. And the second quote that builds on that, I believe, and gives it some context is from a writer. Her name is Adrienne Marie Brown. Some of you may know this quote well. But she was reflecting on how we were exposed to all this information about our changing environment and illness, and even how we interact with each other socially because of the pandemic. The polarization, the rise of nationalism, the emergence and reemergence of wars around the world. And with everyone feeling a great sense of despair and leaders saying, "How will I lead my community, my family through this?" She said, "Things are not getting worse." She said, "They're getting uncovered." She said, "We must hold on to each other tight and continue to pull back the veil." Now, of course, there are many connotations that you can ascribe to this quote, but I think for me, it raised even a brighter light on the role of vulnerability. And I'll just close the opening remarks by saying, what happens when we don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable? Well, for example, we saw in the last year 3 university presidents of prestigious institutions all lose their jobs because they refused in a public setting in front of the US Senate to reveal their vulnerability or their self-doubt. And as a result, I believe they were over-prepared by their lawyers, and they refused to be human. They refused to show empathy for different people with different beliefs on 2 sides of a very divisive conflict around religion that's resulted in war. And so I think it's a big time for us to ask ourselves, how are we using vulnerability as a tool when you go back to school or in your family as a catalyst for conversation to help people share their deepest held beliefs and fears? So I hope that's useful.
Thank you very much, Jane. Very useful. If I can just extend that thought on vulnerability. The flip side of vulnerability is overusing your strengths. And we all know our strengths. Are we overusing them? And I think the Harvard Business Review management tips for self-awareness, do get a hold of that book. I think I picked it up from the Delhi bookstore on one of my travels. And one of the things they say is that if you overuse your strengths, then it gets you into trouble. For example, if you, let's say, have a lot of self-control and self-control is your strength, then it can result in long-term rigidity. If you are very honest, then the flip side of being overly honest all the time and overusing that strength is that then you could be cruel sometimes without even knowing it. So I think as part of the self-discovery journey, know your strengths, that's important. But more importantly, don't overuse those strengths. And I think being vulnerable as a leader just signals to your team that it's okay not to be okay sometimes. And I always tell my staff as well, I tell my teachers, the day you're not having a good day, don't go to class. Because you're going to mess up your relationship with your students and your colleagues. Go to the infirmary, lie down, go to the staff room, take a half-an-hour break. We'll get you substitution, but do not go to class and interact with students when you're not in a good frame of mind. And to know that and to admit it is important. And I'm sure even you as leaders do that from time to time. You do signal to your staff, today I'm not in a good frame of mind, I don't want to interact, and that's perfectly okay. There are occasions when we've seen exemplary showcasing of vulnerability, and I'm sure each one of you have your own examples. So before we go ahead, and this is not a ploy to wait for Laksharaj-ji, but as you know, I think, do we have a vulnerability story in the audience that we'd like to share? We'll bring a mic around. And you need to be vulnerable to share, to be able to share a vulnerability story. I'll share. Yes, please.
So good morning, everyone. They forgot to put me in the panel, but I made sure that I spoke. Having said that, one of the most or the biggest lessons I learned from a grade 1 student. And I think that has made me a stronger person. So when I was in Udaipur, I was teaching English to grades 1 and 2. And over there, children mostly talk in Hindi. Those who are from Rajasthan know that there's a lot of Hindi being spoken. And like a typical teacher, I had this habit of running a line right through if the handwriting was not good. I'm sure many of you have done it. Those who didn't do it are the good teachers. But I did it. And this little boy, he goes back to his seat, murmuring under his breath something, and I could see it was directed towards me. And as he walked back and sat down at his seat, he told the neighbor that something. And again, I knew it was about me. And my ego was very badly hurt by this grade 1 student. And I decided to take the bull by the horn, and I said, "What did you say?" So the little boy, obviously intimidated by me, didn't say anything. And, you know, people in Rajasthan are very, very well behaved. I mean, you'll see Laksharaj as he walks in. And so as he kept his head down, I got very upset. My ego was getting really battered now, and I saw this boy next to him, and I said, "Can you tell me what he said?" So he said, he didn't speak at first. Then he said, when I insisted, he says, "Main Hindi mein bolu?" So I said, "Haan, bolo." So he said, "Ye keh raha hai कि मैम का हैंडराइटिंग कौन सा अच्छा है कि मेरा काट दिया." Ladies and gentlemen, to translate it for those who don't understand Hindi, how good is ma'am's handwriting that she ran a line across my handwriting? And I can tell you that was a turning point of my life. Who the hell are we? What do we think we are? And it has taken me a good 33 years to understand who am I. That's all I want to say.
Thank you very much, Rupa. Now I know why you wear that pink with such aplomb. For those of you who haven't seen her, she sits on a pink chair, by the way. Just saying. I've never seen a head of school sitting on a pink chair. But thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure there are other vulnerability stories as well, which we will pick up as we go. I've just got a message from Laksharaj who says that unbelievable traffic this morning. The rain isn't helping. He's on his way. I said, relax. The panel is going on. And as soon as you come, we'll welcome you. So if we could take the conversation back to, could you share some of the strategies you have? I have to admit, actually, you know, I have phobia for reading, and this is often my nemesis. As a grade 7 student, I was just called upon suddenly to, and I'll share this story. I was called upon to take part in the debate. You know, you have inter-house debates in school, and I grew up in a small town called Devlali. And we had, it was the Barnes High School. And I was just told by my housemaster, okay, you're representing Helen Keller, which is the Blue House, and you're going to debate. I said, I've never debated. He says, no, you argue a lot. You should be good at debating. I said, all right. And so I went to my neighbor, and she wrote me copious notes on the topic. And I translated that into my not so good handwriting, Rupa, and managed to take the notes with me. And I thought I knew the points, but when I came and stood in front of the audience, I just froze. And I just looked down and I looked at my notes and I just mumbled and I walked off. And I still remember my housemaster telling me, I was so disappointed in you. And that hasn't left me. And that's why I find it very, very difficult to read from notes. And that's why my staff tell me also, when we have a prize day and I'm presenting a report, they say, we never know what you're going to say. So the people in the box at the back have to really be alert and careful. So there are plenty of notes prepared, and I'm not sure what we're going to pick out from there, but we've told the team that we're going to play it by ear and just pick the lines and stories that we think are resonating with the audience. So please bear with us. Rupa and Anju, can you share actually, what are some of the strategies? You've shared some amazing, we've had some conversations as a lead up to this summit, and you've shared some of the things that you do in your classroom that really encourages reflection for students and teachers. And could you share some of those?
Yeah, so I do hear a lot about, everybody's reflection and experiential learning are the new buzzwords, holistic learning. And I often wonder, first of all, what are we reflecting on? It's easy to put children into a state of reflection, but what is the nature of experience that have you created meaningful experiences for the child? And have you a pedagogy for the reflection? Because reflection is not something the children have learned prior, nor have the teachers actually. So there has to be a proper way of doing this in the classroom. So what, for me, intuition, or what people call mindfulness today, again, that's become very fashionable. These are not extracurricular things to do. These are not things that, let's do 5 minutes or 10 minutes of mindfulness now, and then you'll be calm, and that's so good for you for your exams then. No, that's not a tool. Exams are stressful anyway. So I saw this entire film, made, I saw it in Paris, which was made by US universities on mindfulness in US schools and universities. And I was so shocked at the explanation, because one of the professors said, we use mindfulness just before exams so then they can do better at exams. So I'm like, if exams are creating stress, then first remove that, right? So that's the thing. So now mindfulness or intuitive experiences have to be woven into the curriculum. Otherwise, it's not meaningful. It has to be woven into my life, because it's a tool to use. It's a tool to access either deeper knowledge or some information that I have or I wish to procure. How do you do that? I'll give you 2-3 examples. Sometimes when when I would do things like Robert Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken, it's about life choices. And after that, we would do an intuitive exercise, mindfulness, guided meditation, to look at 2 choices of 2 career paths that the children want to take. So you have a literature part and you have an intuitive guided meditation. I take them exactly, which in fact we'll be doing this afternoon in the consciousness track, Pascal and I, on a guided meditation to feel what is a better option for me. Or if you're doing Alice in Wonderland down the rabbit hole, that's a fantastic journey. So can we all have those rabbit holes, and we can all go down those rabbit holes to experience. It's a shamanic journey actually. So then we put on music and then we go on to our own journeys. Or a third example, when we're looking at trees, you can look at trees for science, you can observe, you can touch, feel, but we would also do an intuitive exercise where with mindfulness, we would ask the tree a question. And I just tell children, ask a question and see if some answer comes to you, and just jot it down. Now, it may be the imagination, it doesn't matter. It's something's coming. And the last point, really important, dream journals, asking children to note down their dreams. Because if you begin to remember your dreams, then you can begin to look at code, what are the symbols in your dream? What are dream symbols? Let children draw it out, let children discuss it. So there are many techniques that we can bring into our classrooms which are meaningful. And in fact, for me, these tools are actually something that should help me in my life later on. All those formulas that we have learned by heart, all those dates of battles of Panipat and God knows and how many times who raided us and who plundered us, it doesn't help me actually, not in my life. Because I don't know how am I going to deal with emotions, how am I going to deal with betrayal, how am I going to deal with so many other things, ups and downs that happen. Schools are not preparing children emotionally or for well-being to deal. You're having more and more of that after the pandemic, having issues of well-being or burnout, teacher burnout. How many teachers are suffering because they are also having the same issues? So I think this is a tool to be used for everybody, but it has to be brought into the mainstream as a tool to be used, just as you're using artificial intelligence, just as a way of using ChatGPT. We've used iPads, we've used other things. This is also a tool. And believe me, when you begin to use it, then as Carl Jung spoke about synchronicities, then the magic really begins to happen. You begin to enter a moment where you begin to see patterns between things. You begin to see that there are no coincidences. Beyond coincidences, there's something very powerful things happening in the universe. And I think that's the entry point into a portal of something which is of greatest significance in our human lives, in our human condition. Otherwise, we are in an existential trap. And, you spoke about thinking, Descartes, René Descartes, the great French philosopher, got this great formula, I think, therefore I am. And that's been the problem of our human condition. We're overthinking. We're just thinking and thinking, and we've stopped being. So there is a mind, there's intellect, but there's also the heart. And the heart also has an intelligence. So I think we need to access that in our classroom practices.
Thank you so much. Such poignant points brought out. Absolutely wonderful. And I think it was Jalaluddin Rumi who said in his, the author of the book Chasing Rumi. Has anyone read Chasing Rumi? So they quoted Jalaluddin Rumi, and really they said that, he said that your big task is to search within and find the barriers that you've created for yourself. And it's those barriers, when you overcome, that it gets, better in life for you.
I have to add to that, Rumi. What a great, beautiful mystic poet. So one of his beautiful lines is, "It is the crack that lets the light in." And that crack, till you don't feel that shock, something hits you, something is painful, and then you turn towards something greater than yourself. And then the light comes in. Without the crack, we are in the darkness too. So it has its purpose,
Thank you. So the Japanese have a term for it. It's called kintsugi.
Yes.
And when a bowl is broken, they actually drip in gold in those cracks and make it more beautiful. So thank you for sharing. But I also want to add one more point. If you're familiar with J. Krishnamurti's philosophy, and J. Krishnamurti in one of his schools down south, this is what they used to practice, because a friend of mine, her children used to go there, and when she shared this, I said, wow, I'd love to be able to implement it in my school. I never have. It's still a dream, but perhaps one day. And she said every day at sunset, the entire school would go to the hilltop and they would sit in silence. You can do what you want, but you have to be silent. You can read, you can write, you can watch the sunset, you can let your mind wander. And that was such a beautiful form of being in a meditative state. So the power of the pause is where you've drawn me to. And really, I'm going to turn to Jane now to ask her, every organization will only do better when they exercise the power of the pause in this mad rush that we have. That we all hurl ourselves into meeting targets and KPIs and all the rest of it. But the power of the pause is so important. And how do you use that? Or do you use that to empower your team? Or do you use something else?
It's such an important question, isn't it? And again, going back to, if we're so busy rushing ahead with the solutions, we don't take time to hear the challenges. And so pausing, or knowing when to pause, is really important. Now, for me, probably one of the most painful realizations I ever had was when one of my colleagues actually asked me a powerful question. And it was about an act that I hadn't taken or something I hadn't done. And it wouldn't have happened if there hadn't been a pause or room for reflection, as we said at the beginning, taking time to have people talk about what keeps them up at night. That's a great meeting starter, by the way, for your leadership teams. When you came into work today, what were you thinking about? When you woke up in the morning, what did you most want to do? How often do we take time to use those thoughts to set our agendas? Well, for me, it was several years ago. Again, we were working virtually only. It was in the middle of a lockdown in the pandemic. And we were talking about a whole range of tools and resources and what we were going to do. Again, action, solution oriented, right? We're always in delivery mode. And at the end of the conversation, one of the associate directors stopped and there was a pause. at the end of the virtual meeting. There's actually some time left, that precious time. And he said, I was writing something over the last few days, and I wanted to know, I'm going to send it to you because I was thinking maybe we could publish it. I said, sure, I would, love to see what you wrote. Well, when he submitted the blog, this is a young man in his mid-30s who is a person of color who had grown up in the United States, whose parents were Kenyan. And he had been a product of international education. But the first line of the story that he wrote after this period of separation and lockdown was,
Sorry.
yes.
Sorry, Jane, for the interruption, but yes, we've been waiting. No, not at all. We know what the Delhi traffic is like. Please have a seat. Yes, please. So we'll just carry on and then pass the mic on. Please, Jane.
Well, it was a powerful story about that he himself said as a student, was both a victim and a beneficiary of international education all at the same time. And he was talking about hidden discrimination and racism. And when I read the story, of course, I wrote back to him right away. Again, we were all working virtually. And I said, of course, we're going to publish this. We'll publish it tomorrow. It was one of those many stories that our students started writing in 2021, talking about how international education had in some ways shielded them, prevented them from the cruel or harsh realities of the world. When you leave that bubble of understanding of people across cultures. But my painful moment of realization was, as I was mentioning we were going to publish the blog, he said, actually, he goes, can I ask you a question? And I said, sure. And he said, why didn't you call me after George Floyd was murdered? I didn't have an answer for him. It never had occurred to me to call him and ask him what he was thinking or feeling. But that question, in that moment, I realized I had failed my colleague, that he was looking to me for support and care. I didn't know he needed it. And what happened is it led to powerful conversations then, because we realized what we were thinking and feeling was so different in the aftermath of that tragic incident that we actually said, well, maybe what we should do is have another conversation and share it with our colleagues. And what happened then is many people came up and started talking about their own experiences of racism and discrimination, talk about vulnerability. And then we would have people say, well, my parents told me it's not nice to talk about racism. Or another colleague said, well, I talk about my experiences, but only with people who look like me. So it was a way, again, of using our vulnerability that opened up conversations that were truly healing and helped all of us organizationally. So that's my own story of a very painful leadership realization of failure in my own leadership.
That's very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think, when we don't realize the power of the pause, and when we have 5 minutes, we have to fill it. But when you didn't fill it, see what surfaced. And thank you. I want to share that, have you heard of the term Hakawati? So the Hakawatis were a group of storytellers who went from tribe to tribe in the Emirates and in Saudi Arabia. And they would go, from one tribe to another sharing stories, basically oral history in a different form. And so the Hakawatis were a very revered and a very cherished group of people. And they're storytellers. And I think that's what the panel is, storytellers. And through the power of storytelling, you brought out something very powerful. Before, we'll give Laksharaj a moment to catch his breath as well. He's been through grueling traffic. But Jane, you also shared with me the story of how that one Filipino gentleman in the Philippines, made a difference, and the way in which sometimes unusual stories surface, which give you powerful lessons. So I'm going to just ask you to narrate that story, and before I pass the mic to Laksharaj.
Well, we've all learned from so many different people in our international education careers. And for me, it was a young Filipino man who had just returned to the Philippines after teaching as in the United States on a cultural exchange program. And there were about 100 Filipino teachers who were getting ready themselves to go to the United States to teach. And we asked him, because I was working for an organization that sponsored these cultural exchanges, and I asked him, would you mind leading a pre-departure session in Manila for these 100 teachers before they go to the United States so they can learn from your experience? He was so happy to do it. And the auditorium was filled that day. He came in that morning and he had prepared a slide deck. And in the audience, not only came the 100 Filipino teachers, but they came with their children, with their parents, with their friends. We had probably 1,000 people in the auditorium. And he got up in the front of the room and he put up his first slide. And his first slide was of a car, an automobile. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, you are about to have an amazing cultural experience. And he said, and I want you to look at this picture. He said, and repeat after me. He said, when I go to the United States, I will not honk my horn. And immediately everyone in unison repeated, I will not honk my horn. And he did it several times. Now this story himself, he believed, he felt when he arrived, he realized through experience that it wasn't appreciated when he was honking his horn repeatedly, but he didn't want others to have that same experience of embarrassment or failure because they didn't understand the context. Anyway.
The point why I asked Jane, I requested Jane to share that story is because sometimes we're so fixated on the teacher standards, looking at the big things, that we forget it's these nuances that help people settle in better. And when they're comfortable with themselves and who they are and their surroundings, they just perform better. So creating the environment for people to be comfortable in their skins so that they perform better. And with that, we've all been waiting for you, sir. And there are so many stories that he shared with us. It's not often you get an 8-time Guinness Book Record winner, TEDx speaker, Maharaja sitting in our midst. So over to you, sir.
Firstly, my sincere apologies for being late, but as you said, you've been waiting. I said, "Jo maza intezar mein hai, shayad wo wasle yaar mein nahi." So, and and I will also excuse myself from the English language. I will try my best, but English is like my friends. It's very strong, but unfortunately, I don't have much control over it. So I will certainly try my best. So in case if I slip, please just give me a nudge. But what is it that we are going to be? What do you want me to talk about now?
So, like we discussed when we had a pre-panel discussion, that how is the journey of self-discovery? And you yourselves have some very powerful stories to share. How has that helped you and your teams? And by the way, he wears so many hats and he's dabbled in so many industries and done well at all of them. So really, what is the magic that's working? And how do you use self-reflection really as a tool for you and your team to perform at that rarefied level that you do?
Well, I thought you were going to be asking me easy questions. I thought that was the deal. But I guess it's obviously changed once I got here. I think probably my punishment time for being late. But yes, there are a lot of things. And I think self-discovery and the word power, I think that the second half of it I relate to a little less. But I think we'll get to it when we do. But I think self-discovery is all about kind of having to improve. And I think as a human race, what I mentioned earlier as well, and when we were having conversations, and insignificant of geographical boundaries, we love to fix things that are not broken. You give somebody a gadget or you give somebody a conversation which may be perfectly normal. It may not require anything, but as a race, we will try and make it better or fix it because in our mind, we think it's broken. अब इसको कैसे ठीक करें, इसको सुधारा जा सकता है, so it's something that is inherent. So we have to be slightly more conscious of the fact that, there are certain things sometimes we just need to let be, sometimes things flourish better if they're just left natural and not poured in and poked too much. some of the things I think with the Indian culture, predominantly talking about the Indian culture, if there are similarities in other cultures, I'm sure, there could be a takeaway from that as well. We have a proving problem. Every time as a child or as a parent or in start of any sort of segment that you may be in, we have to keep proving. Now, in school, when I was there, I had to keep proving that I was a good student by getting good marks. Right? If you didn't get good marks, you were not a good student. It was as simple as that. Take him around the corner, give them a few tight ones, bring them back, and they'll be fine. And then the next time round, and that's why I've become the way I have now. So, but that is when I say very, very strongly, and to those people who feel that way, and that's where it comes back and relates to the topic of having to the self discovery process, and that is only going to allow you to take place when you're not hellbound in just kind of or determined to prove. And before I complete this statement, we are all participating in a rat race, and talking about rat races, the first qualification you require to participate in a rat race is to be a rat. So you need to ask yourself, if you are one, then that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you aren't, then what else are the possibilities? So what is it that I'm really trying to say? What I'm really trying to say here is that the idea is never to prove. The idea is always to improve. So this journey is about improvement. That is where your self-growth is going to come from. That is where your discovery is going to come from. That is where you're going to be allowing yourself to be a little bit more receptive. And the idea is, again, never to go through life. The idea is always about growing through life. So that growth and that improvement will only come when you let away and let go of just going and proving. When you let go of these two things, it will very organically allow you to improve. It will very organically allow you to start growing in a very organic manner, where you will have wonderful discoveries and conversations along the journey that you have embarked on. So these are small tools, small processes, which intake allows you to do two things. Once you know, and how do you cross check this? Like, even we love to cross check that, yes, if you're on the right path or not. Even mathematics tells you, to make sure that you double check everything. And that happens when, if you are confronted with a situation or a circumstance or a scenario, you don't end up reacting to it. You then end up responding to it. So when you're starting to grow in life, when you stop proving and start improving in life, you will automatically start responding to life rather than reacting to life. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. You've passed the test. But I could see so many heads nodding as you were saying, and that's distilled wisdom. I'm just conscious of time, and we would have loved to hear more from you. But he was open to share that he had a severe form of dyslexia, which wasn't discovered until late. But through that, he never used that as an impediment, but used it only as an opportunity to grow. And look at what he's achieved today. So I think, well done, sir. Well done. We're going to throw it open to the floor at this point in time. And I always say that the solutions come from the floor. They never come from the top. So I think we've got amazing, a group of reflective individuals here. So if we can pass the mic on, please. And we have a first hand up here.
Excellent talks. Thank you so much. I have a question about what you just said, which really connects to what you two were talking about. If you have parents who are well-meaning, but it's a fear-based parenting paradigm because that's the world that they navigated, but you want to try to get kids out of that proving, and you want them to be able to be vulnerable so that, like Anju said, they can really explore who they are in a safe way. If the school's doing that, the kids are thriving in the school building, how do you work with parents who may not have read the books or understood that? And I'm just wondering if you had thoughts around that.
Interesting. So currently, ma'am, just to let you know, I'm pursuing my PhD in stress management. And that is also in the range of the younger students from grade 9 to grade 12. So one of the things that I stumbled upon along the way, and also cutting into the point that was mentioned earlier about racism, and it's not only restricted to the obvious that we keep facing, sometimes certain things from very weird areas come out and pop up, which we are sometimes not conscious of. And this term, generation, right? I look at it as generacism. Okay? Just because somebody was born in a certain era, we have compartmentalized them and put them in a certain box, thinking and making them relevant or irrelevant. Oh, this is X and this is Y, and I don't even know the other terminologies, to be very honest. So the same thing trickles down to parenting as well. And in a way that I have experienced it myself, on one form, I will say that my mother has been my best friend. She is probably my mother later. She's a friend to me first. And the age gap is over 40 years between her and me. Until today, we share the greatest relationship. Now, that really, according to me, depends on both those individuals. Fear neither is good for the parent and neither is it good for the child. And it's not only for one. And it's not only something that we are feeling sympathetic towards just one segment of the two, which is the child. It is equally torturing for the parent as well. So I think it's somewhere or the other where we need to be conscious of the fact that how can we get this fear sort of concept out of this entire scenario and make a more fruitful sort of an association. And I think cultural boundaries in this play a huge role. And for everything in life, and this is food for thought, in everything in life, we need a degree or a qualification. But for the greatest responsibility of life, you never need a degree, which is being a parent.
Thank you very much. Before I take the next one, if I can add some comments to what Lakshara just said. So the way I do it is I project the World Economic Forum report for 2023. And because this is a problem I think we all face at some point. How do you shift mindset of parents? And the younger the parent, because they've not had, their nuclear families now, because they've not had the luxury of a joint family, their new parents, their parenting style is not there. And for the older ones, they're only doing what they know. So as Lakshad said, they want the best for their child. They think this is the best for their child. So once they know this is not the best for their child. So what does the World Economic Forum 23 report tell you? It tells you about the skills of the future. And it shows you the top 10 skills that children will require. And nowhere does it show you need the skills to be a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer or whatever else you need to be, or to be overly disciplined for that matter in terms of, which stream you choose. And then you show them the human-machine boundary and how that is, eroding. And so what are we training our children for? What are the jobs of the future? And I think once they get that understanding, it shifts. Also, if they don't get it even then we have smaller group meetings, because parents in large groups, it doesn't work when you're trying to, embed some new age thought. But when you meet them in smaller groups and you show them the benefit, like Laksharat says, the mother or the dad is the best friend for the child at some point. And so when they understand that and they know how to work their relationship to their advantage by enabling their child to be, better equipped for the future, I think it works then. Thank you. Yes, please. Can we have a mic at the back?
Yes, I would also like to add something to what she was inquiring on, as well as asking a question afterwards about parents who we also call caregivers. In our school, I'm from Still Arise International School, Nairobi, Kenya, but we're also opening a school here in Mumbai. What we offer students is free IB education to the most vulnerable and refugee kids, whereby we give them everything: school fees, uniform, medical care, food, everything. And we have something called a co-educational pact that we have with the caregivers, that is their parents, which means that they're obligated to be still part of the growth of the child in the education, no matter, because we're giving them everything. So there are a few things that we need them to do, like come for meetings, come and check on the well-being of the child, how they're performing and their growth in academics, in behavior. So they're obligated to at least do that much, as much as we're giving them everything. And that way they're part of the child's growth, they're part of the child's education, and through everything, like to make sure that everything is still being attained, because they don't have that pressure of feeling, okay, I need to look for school fees, I need to look for uniform, I need to look for food or something. But at this point, since we have provided everything for them, it's just a matter of come in and just make sure your child is progressing well in their education. So having a co-educational pack, because it means that as much as teachers and the management is part of the growth of the child, the caregivers are also part of that growth, and they need to know that they are part of it. It's not a matter of they give us the child, they wash their hands and walk away. They have to be part of the growth throughout, and it's very important because we cannot bring up these kids on our own, because most of the time they're in school, but they need to know that they're supposed to help them through this journey.
Thank you so much for sharing. I'll give you an opportunity to ask your question, but I just wanted to say that's social responsibility at another level. And since Ms. Jane's CIS organization really looks deeply into social responsibility, I'm sure you can connect with her after this. Your question, ma'am.
Yes, my question is on dream journals that was mentioned actually earlier by her. Well, that is a lovely idea, and I think it's something that can be implemented, but I think I'll open this to everyone on how you support the kids or encourage the students to actually write dream journals, because as much as it's fantastic, I have that struggle myself at school where I'll tell them, write the stuff down, what you want to be, what you want to do, write it down. And at times it can be hard for them to really grasp or understand exactly what to do. A few of them can and be like, okay, I want to do this in future. Then at a point it will change to something else, which is all good because it's something that they're learning and it's something that they're getting to understand with the different careers that they see out there. But how can I be able to support my students to make it something constant or to be consistent with writing their dream journals and to see the importance of dream journals and to enjoy it, not seeing it like it's a punishment of writing something else, but it's more of, it's a fun journey to learn something about themselves. How do I go about that?
So I'm going to ask Anju to answer that, but I think the two types of dreams. One is what your dreams and aspirations are, and the other is what have you dreamt about. And perhaps, I'm sure she'll take it further from there.
Yes, I think both are important. One is, the kind of dreams you have at night. And it's true that we often don't remember our dreams when we wake up in the morning. So there are techniques to remember that, because you don't move in the morning, you stay still, etc. So many children actually do remember their dreams. It's just that we don't talk about it. But even if they don't, they have imagination. And I think the way to access either of the dreams, whether it is, your nighttime dreams or it is your aspirations, it is always through the process of imagination. And that's something that children have, and it doesn't cost anything to any school. And in order to do that, we have to do a lot of expressive work, which means really a lot of body work, music, having music in the classroom, moments of silence, painting, listening to music and painting, sculpture, drawing, word associations. So, these are things there are a lot of these techniques which will allow children to express what is inside. That's all that is required. So any mode of artistic expression will encourage them to create that dream journal, which need not be only a written thing. It can be drawings, collage, collection of things, symbols that make sense. Did something extraordinary, did something happen today this morning? Oh, well, I saw a bird, and this bird came and pecked at my door, a very unusual bird. And actually that happened to me 3 days ago. And I was so stunned because this doesn't happen every day. Now, what can that mean? What does this bird signify? Does this bird signify flight, colorfulness, valor? I don't know. Things like that. So you begin to look at things as symbols around yourself, in your life. And that's opening a big door. So I think there are ways to do it. And these journals, when they'll create that, it remains something they can go back to as they grow older, as they develop through their childhood. So I think it's possible.
I'm sure you can meet Anju later again. And also, it doesn't have to happen at one point in time. It can happen through different lessons. There was one question at the back. Yes, sir, yourself. And after that question, ma'am, I know you asked a very good question yesterday, so I'm going to take your question on board as well. And then we'll have our closing remarks. Yes, sir.
Good evening. It was very informing, very, very, very good information. But I have a small doubt. This Mr. Maharaj Kumar just mentioned it, that in Indian context, wherever we go, we have to prove ourselves. Isn't it a matter of interpretation? Whatever we do, wherever we go, we have to establish ourselves, isn't it? If you don't establish, you don't exist. You become redundant. And it happens because resources are shrinking. Our life is full of uncertainty. So that's part and parcel of our life, isn't it?
That's my friend PK Nair. He always asks wonderful questions. Over to you, sir.
No, sir, Namaskar. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. But the idea here is to simplify the process. Having to establish yourself and having a burden are two completely different things. So, like having to say that you have a challenge in front of you and you have a burden in front of you. So, if the way you're going to look at both the things are going to be very, very different. When you're looking at something with a mindset of being burdened, it is going to slow your efficiency down. When you're going to look at the same thing as a challenge, it's going to get your adrenaline running. It's going to make you look at things positively. It's going to make you look at things constructively. And I'm all for people having to establish themselves. It's about the journey that you take to that particular destination is what is going to determine everything. And when I'm usually asked this, in the sense that are you a journey person or are you a destinational person? I say I'm none. I am a person who is a company person, that who do I have along the journey with me? Who do I have along with me once I've reached the destination? So it's about having to approach your life in a manner, who do I have with me when I'm establishing myself? How is it that I'm going to be establishing myself? And that journey needs to be the journey that needs to be flavorsome. It's not having to get stuck up or having to dig your heels, or having to look at it. It's just having to pivot that ideology and that thought, which would make it a little bit more enjoyable, because that's what flavor of life is. That is what growing through life is. That is what improvisation is. Because otherwise you're just targeting a very small, minuscule segment, which is probably not going to allow you to absorb what is happening constructively, positively in your environment, which is probably not going to allow all your senses of situational awareness to be open. And it's going to make you very myopic. And here the idea is for you to be exceptionally receptive, take everything that is around you and make sure कि जो आपका लक्ष्य है उस पे आप खूबसूरती से राज कर सको.
Thank you. What a beautiful answer. And I think you're espousing Winnie the Pooh's philosophy, because Winnie the Pooh says, when he was asked, journey or destination, he said, it's the company that matters. Absolutely. But we can also, to quote the Harvard Business Review, I'm a great fan of the Harvard Business Review, and they said exactly what you're saying, and that is, it's important to establish your credibility. It is important. But if you get stuck on only establishing credibility, then as Lakshya says, you cannot grow. And therefore the vulnerability and all the rest of it that comes in. And do we see them as hurdles or do we see them as opportunities, obstacles or opportunities? So thank you very much. And the last question of the day, ma'am, over to you.
Hi, this is Rakhi from Mumbai. Firstly, fantastic panel. It's more than a comment. It's more of a reflection and sharing my vulnerability. Yesterday, very same space, second half of our session, we had a session where they were talking about data. They were talking about taking decisions based on data. And just 5 minutes before I entered the space yesterday, I had to take a very vital decision. And I took that decision based on gut feeling. So the entire session I was attending, and they were talking so much about data, I was having a guilt pang. And did I take the right call? Because I had no time to take data and I'm running a youth school. But today, after listening to this session, especially you, ma'am, you spoke about intuition and you said something very lovely. I actually penned it down and wrote it to my team that intuition stems from this unconscious information which we keep on storing. And the decision I took before entering was the right decision. So I was at ease. So what I'm trying to say is we are vulnerable as heads of school at times and we keep on reflecting. So yesterday, that conversation of taking data driven was very stirring and I was a little unsettled. But today, after listening to your session, I think we are in good space. So thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been a fantastic audience. I must say, you've been participative, you've laughed at the right times, you've cheered us at the right times. And it's really been, you've been patient. When we had our third panelist come in, but he just...
They slept at the right time too.
Absolutely. But he really rocked it. I mean, with the short span of time he had. I also want to just end with, have you read Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist? You have. So Santiago, when he dreams, when he gets...
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
So may I
Thank
felicitate
you,
you
thank you,
for
thank
this.
you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nargis. That was wonderful. Big round of applause. That's really great. Thank you for coming and always a pleasure to listen to all of you. So much.
Excellent. Thank you so very much. We have just a few more words in closing from our wonderful students, and then we'll have opportunities to connect.
Thank you to our esteemed panel and moderator, Ms. Nargish, Ms. Anju, Ms. Jane, and Mr. Laksharaj. As we conclude this profound exploration into self-discovery and leadership, we are left with a crucial question. Are we leading with projection or reflection? Let us carry forward this imperative to lead with ethical resilience and profound introspection. Our institutions, our communities, and our world await the impact of leaders who dare to embrace this inward journey. We would now like to welcome Michelle Whittingham, our Chair of the Presidential Committee and Associate Vice Chancellor of Enrollment Management from University of California, Santa Cruz, for closing remarks.
Excellent. I will be very, very brief with the closing remarks, and then we are going to take a moment to recognize the entire committee who helped put this on. But first and foremost, I want to recognize the panelists that we've had for the last couple of days. Rupa Mom's incredible hospitality at Sun City School. So Rupa, that was absolutely phenomenal. Networking from the very beginning, we've learned how critical the networking is. The feedback comes from everybody. We continue to evolve the Presidential Forum and the Presidential Committee work. So continue to provide feedback. But for each and every one of you, I want to really continue with Anju's message about the energy that we all bring. And it is your energy that you have brought, your true identities, your true self that you brought here today that has made this and yesterday in the dinner so very, very special. So we will be taking this with us as we go. And if we could at this time, I think we're going to bring up all of the Presidential Committee members. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the students, but thank you again for bringing your true selves and all the energy to this work.
We would love to recognize this year's IC3 Presidential Committee members who created such a beautiful and inspiring event. If each one of you could stand up and come forward when your name has been called. Michelle Whittingham, Chair of the Presidential Committee and Associate Vice Chancellor of Enrollment Management from University of California, Santa Cruz. Ms. Rupa Chakravarti, Co-Chair of the Presidential Committee and Director of Sun City Schools, Gurugram, who also planned and organized such a beautiful dinner on Tuesday. Dr. Caroline Pascoe, Principal of the International School, Bangalore. Dr. Jay Shankar Raman, Executive Director of International Affairs, Office of Chancellor, California State University. Mr. Miguel Costa Gonzalez, Associate Dean of Admissions and Outreach from IE University, Spain. Ms. Nargish Kambata, Principal and CEO of GEMS Modern Academy and Senior Vice President of GEMS Education. Captain Rohit Sen Bajaj, School Director of Pathway School, Gurgaon. Ms. Seema Sapru, Principal of Heritage School. Ms. Sita Murthy, Director of Education from Silver Oaks International School, Hyderabad, Bangalore. Mr. Swaraj Nanda, Director and Co-founder of CIC Univ Assist. Ms. Vanita Uppal, OBE, Director of the British School, New Delhi. And Dr. YSR Murthy, Vice Chancellor of RV University. Thank you all once again. There are plenty of sessions still happening throughout the day, so please engage with the rest of the conference. And safe travels to anyone that has traveled to New Delhi for this event. We appreciate your leadership and support of counseling in every school.